My name is Jake, and this happened to me 3 years ago when I was 26, living in a small apartment building in Portland, Oregon. It was one of those old brick buildings with 4 units, 2 upstairs and 2 downstairs. I had the bottom left unit, and the apartment directly above me was occupied by a woman named Mrs. Chen. She was in her late 60s, lived alone, and seemed harmless enough. For the first month, everything was normal. I'd hear her walking around upstairs sometimes, the usual creaking of floorboards, running water, the sound of her TV playing old game shows. We'd occasionally see each other in the hallway or by the mailboxes. She'd always smile politely and ask how my day was going. She seemed like a sweet, lonely old lady. Then one day in early October, I realized I hadn't seen her in about 2 weeks. Her mail was piling up in the lobby. I mentioned it to the landlord, Mr. Patterson, who said he'd look into it. He knocked on her door a few times over the next few days but got no answer. He said he'd give it another week before doing a wellness check. Here is where things got strange. Even though I hadn't seen Mrs. Chen, I could still hear someone upstairs. The footsteps continued. The TV still played at night. Water still ran through the pipes above my ceiling. I figured maybe she was just avoiding people or wasn't feeling well. Old people can be private like that. But then I started noticing patterns that didn't make sense. The footsteps upstairs would pace back and forth across the same path over and over again for hours, always the same route. From what I could tell, it went from the living room to the kitchen, pause, then back to the living room. It would repeat maybe 50 times before stopping. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up to that pacing again, back and forth, back and forth. I grabbed a broom and tapped on my ceiling, hoping whoever it was would get the message and stop. The footsteps stopped immediately. Then, after about 30 seconds of silence, I heard what sounded like someone stomping on the floor above me. Not walking, stomping, hard. It was so loud that picture frames on my wall started shaking. I called the landlord the next morning. I told him something was seriously wrong upstairs and that he needed to check on Mrs. Chen immediately. He was annoyed with me, said I was overreacting, but he finally agreed to do a welfare check that afternoon. When Mr. Patterson opened Mrs. Chen's apartment with his master key, I was standing in the hallway. I wanted to know what was going on. The moment he opened that door, a smell hit us. It wasn't the smell of death like you see in movies. It was worse. It was the smell of something rotting mixed with something chemical, like cleaning products mixed with decay. Mr. Patterson went inside for maybe 30 seconds before he came running out, face white as a sheet, and immediately called 911. He wouldn't let me inside, but he told me to go back to my apartment and stay there. The police arrived within 10 minutes, then the coroner, then more police. I watched through my peephole as they brought Mrs. Chen out in a body bag. The officer I spoke with later told me she had died of natural causes, likely a heart attack, and had been dead for at least 3 weeks based on the state of decomposition. 3 weeks? But I had been hearing footsteps. I had been hearing the TV. I had heard water running. I told the officer about the sounds. He gave me this look like he was trying to be patient with me and said old buildings make noise, pipes make noise, sound travels weird in these places. He said what I was hearing was probably from one of the other units or from outside. I didn't argue with him, but I knew what I heard. That night, I tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about it. Mrs. Chen had been dead for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of footsteps. 3 weeks of someone pacing above me. Around midnight, I heard it again. The footsteps, the same pattern. Living room to kitchen, pause, back to the living room. Over and over. But the apartment above me was empty now. Completely empty. I grabbed my phone and started recording audio. I wanted proof. I stood in the middle of my living room holding my phone up toward the ceiling, and you could hear it clear as day on the recording. Footsteps, creaking, movement. I called the landlord despite it being past midnight. He was angry at first, but when I sent him the audio recording, he went quiet. Then he said he'd come over. When he arrived, we both stood in my apartment listening. Nothing. Complete silence. He looked at me like I was losing my mind. But then I played him the recording on my phone. His face went pale. He could hear it too. He said he'd go check upstairs just to make sure no one had broken in. I went with him. We walked up the stairs and he unlocked Mrs. Chen's apartment. We stepped inside and he turned on the lights. The apartment was empty, completely cleared out.